Obviously, for those who encounter it, the Hizmet movement portrays a sense of dialogue and coming together. I think that that is important, that we do experience a common life, a common understanding, and that starts with understanding what the faith commitments are of the other. My knowledge, which is not it seems to me that the dialogue is probably some parts of Christianity is a kind of a sense of triumphalism, where some would something. I'm Reverend Skip LaRue. I've been Executive Director of the Queens Federation of Churches for the past 37 years. I'm an ordained clergyman of the United Methodist Church. I served two local churches in New York in the 1970s, one in Northport, Long Island, and the other in Maspeth, Queens. And one of the activities and interests that I've pursued for now 3 decades has been religious liberty. And I've worked with both the National Council of Churches and the First Amendment Center in Washington, and I moderate the National Committee on Religious Liberty for the last 14 years. My encounter actually came through the Turkish Cultural Center of Queens, which originally was called the Turkish and American Multicultural Educational Foundation. And this goes back about 10 years, and participated with that organization in their annual Brotherhood Friendship dinners and some of the other activities. I was part of a group from the Queens Federation of Churches that visited in Turkey in 2013, and we had a delightful time touring there and getting to see hands-on some of the projects actually that the Hizmet movement was doing in Turkey, and we're keenly interested in the whole concept of interfaith dialogue. I would not claim to have a full working knowledge of the writings and and all of the activities that Mr. Gulen is involved in, but in terms of the ideas of promoting dialogue and the value of education in that and other ways is familiar to me, and I think is a very important thing for us as societies. From my knowledge, which is not complete, of the Hizmet movement, it seems to me that the dialogue is probably the strongest and most valuable part, which isn't to diminish the value of other components. But it seems to me that we as people, from whatever country, with whatever faith, whatever culture we spend our lives growing up in, it's very important that we recognize one another as members of the same human family, and that we see each other in the light of familiarity rather than difference. And if we will approach it from that standpoint, we're usually surprised, but pleasantly surprised, that in fact we have many of the same aspirations for ourselves, for our children, for our families, for our communities, and that the differences that often are pointed out by the media and by politicians really are the less significant features. The commonalities are far greater. It's important for all of us to enter into this kind of dialogue and to understand. My suspicion, I would say, is that those who refuse to participate in dialogue generally do so to kind of protect some kind of a self-identity that is really incomplete for any of us. I can speak from the Christian community side, since I obviously grew up in that and know that better. And one of the problems that we have in some parts of Christianity is a kind of a sense of triumphalism, where some would claim, well, we have the whole truth. Why should we bother talking with somebody else who, if we have the whole truth, obviously they don't? And that's really, well, it's wrong. It's just not true. No one has the complete truth. and we certainly can learn from one another, we can share, and that doesn't mean it destroys or attacks the faith either one of us has at the beginning and probably will remain with, but it does give us a sense, as I had said earlier, that we are all members of the same human family, and that there is far more that we have in common than we have apart. Obviously, for those who encounter it, the Hizmet movement portrays a sense of dialogue and coming together. For those who've never heard of it, obviously it has no meaning whatsoever. I think that that is important, that we do experience a common life, a common understanding, and that starts with understanding what the faith commitments are of the other. It's not a denial, it's not a merging of the faiths, but it's a recognition that there are elements, and surprisingly so, that are much more alike even within the theology of the faiths than there are things that are different. It's a simple truism that the youth are our future. That doesn't really say a whole lot because it's sort of obvious, it's a tautology. If we are not educated, we are ignorant. It's as simple as that. And ignorance is the breeding ground for suspicion, for bigotry, for hatred. Education breaks down those barriers. One of the values that I have seen in Christian ecumenism, but I would extend this also to interfaith dialogue, is a sense that, number one, in Scripture, in Genesis, God created the earth, and He created human beings and placed us here to live in this creation of God's hands. And ecumenical, the word ecumenical derives from a Greek word oikumene, which means not universal, which people think ecumenical means, but rather it means the place of habitation, where people live. And where people live, think about it just in specific terms, they live in a household. And the people who live in that household together are family. Well, if this is God's household, the whole vast creation, and we are children of God, however we conceive God to be, because that's much more historically and culturally rooted than it is in reality. I mean, God is God, and He chose to reveal Himself in different ways in different times to different people. And if we recognize that as a common heritage and bond, we really have the opportunity, I think, to grow both in faith and in knowledge of one another. The denial of that, which is at the root of the non-education, is something that's very destructive. And only by learning more about one another and about ourselves are we able to be responsible citizens in this God's household. I am aware that the Hizmet community here, the Turkish community in particular, was very involved in the rescue and recovery work after Hurricane Sandy, especially in Queens and the Rockaways. I think, again, this points to a solidarity that one community has with other communities. We all pull together when there's a tragedy. That may be one of the almost perverse good things that come out of tragedies, whatever the tragedy be. The pulling together of people afterward because they suddenly recognize that the differences are really petty and life is what binds us together in common. Accusations within Turkey, or for that matter within any other country, to say that you're not being, in this case, sufficiently Turkish. It's like accusations in the United States of, well, you're not being sufficiently patriotic Americans if you wind up offering help to people who are not like you. And my comment to them is that that's very ignorant. It's very limited, and frankly is not a good view. Again, repeating, we are people together in one enterprise, which is God's enterprise. Whether we follow the teachings of Islam or of Judaism or Christianity, Buddhism, Hindu, etc. However we seek to identify ourselves and to capture with some sense of sensitivity and understanding our relationship with God and one another, it really winds up coming out very similarly, irrespective of the different faiths. And for us to deny that reality for the sake of creating a siloed community, to be able to be triumphalistic, to say we are the ones and the only ones and we have all the truth and no one else has the truth, that's just simply ignorant and wrong. I hope this doesn't sound pandering, but I have to say that the Muslims whom I've met, both in Hizmet and the Turkish community, but also from other Muslims from other countries, that I have found them to be some of the most open, friendly, and hospitable people I have ever met in my life. And I mean that sincerely. It's almost, in the first instance, it was almost startling. I was a part of a delegation a dozen years ago that went to Egypt to talk about the alleged persecution of Christians with both government and religious leaders. And I'd never been to Egypt before. And this was my first immersion in a Muslim country. And I was astounded by the friendliness, by the happiness. I mean, people were wearing smiles all the time. They were eager to help and eager to greet. And not just because they were the reception crew in the hotel or something like that. These were people on the street, anybody that we encountered. And I found the same thing in Turkey. And among the Muslims that I've come to know very well here in the United States.
I think that Hizmet provides a very positive aspect, or very positive facet for Islam in the world today. As you know, there are a lot of stereotypes of what Islam is in the Western world, and I think that Hizmet helps to break those stereotypes.
My understanding of the teachings of the Hizmet movement and what your ideals are is that you see all human beings as important, and not just Muslims, but that you have a mission to the entire world. With that being said, when there's suffering, when there's pain, when there's a crisis, it's just a natural instinct to reach out to help.